Are you happy with this? Is this good enough? Pecking on the door of the Sweet 16 year in and year out. Is this good? You've got a great man and almost said Quentin Tarantino. In Rick Barnes leading your program. You don't have a Will Wade who's trying to escape the clutches of the FBI. So you don't have to ever worry about that. But you may never make the Final Four. You're just pecking on the door like the crow by Edgar Allan Poe and trying to get into the Sweet 16 year in and year out. Mr. Jones says, does Barnes need to go if he doesn't perform this March? I'm not ready to go nearly that far, but Caleb, it's certainly the direction I'm going in. How much longer does pecking at the Sweet 16 and the possibility of getting in that with no real threat of making the Final Four, because this team doesn't have that. It doesn't. How long is that good enough? I ask you that today's tough question part 2.
It's good enough as long as fan interest is there, and it's good enough as long as every 5 years he can have a team that can make it. Look, I mean, he hasn't made it, but that 2019 team was definitely capable of getting there. Just happened to lose a heartbreaker in the Sweet 16, which happens. So I think
you say as long as that, how long will, let me ask you this, let me rephrase it. How long will the fans be okay with this?
That does become a trickier question. I think
Barnes is 78 years old, by the way. So these once every 5-year runs that you're talking about are 68 years old. Excuse me. Did I say 78?
Well, there's a third caveat here, by the way, and it's who's at athletic director. If Dave Hart's athletic director, if Mike Hamilton's athletic director, if even John Curry's athletic director, and definitely if Philip Fulmer's athletic director, I say you're happy with it because I don't trust any of them to make a good hire. I think John Curry could, but it's like, it's a crapshoot when you make a good hire in college basketball. Danny White's like the reverse. He's going to make a good hire. And so maybe this is where this changes a little bit, is that Danny White is the best in the business at hiring coaches. He's found coaches out of nowhere. He's got a coach he found now has the number 1 overall seed in the NCAA tournament. And another coach he found did the best job in college football last year at Kansas and Lance Leipold. So we're talking the best you could possibly find at hiring coaches. That changes things just a little bit because I would put all my faith in Danny White to hire a new coach. Any other athletic director in the country, including myself, if I'm there, I'd stick with Barnes because I wouldn't trust myself to find a coach the way I trust Danny White.
Well, and remember this, the guy that we would have said a month ago he should hire would be Nate Oates, right?
Yeah.
Alabama. And certainly you wouldn't want to hire him now. And it was just strange timing. I was reading our message board comments and it said they need a scorer like Brandon Miller when they absolutely need points. Well, I don't think anybody would take Brandon Miller right now. Elias gives me some insight because I don't hang out in message boards and I don't probably talk to as many fans as you guys do. And when I do, it's on the show. But Elias says the grumbling is already pretty loud, even if I don't agree with it. I mean, that's a question. Are you fine with having just a good program that it's respectable, but it's not going to make a real Final Four run? Who would you replace him with? Penny Hardaway? Just kidding. No, it wouldn't be Penny. And no, it wouldn't be now Nate Oates at Alabama after we've seen what he's gone through. But Travis, who's a huge Tennessee fan, said, I'm 80% on board with Barnes. And if we make a Final Four, this is a moot point. Absolutely. Make a Final Four. We're not even having this discussion for the next 4 or 5 years. But if you don't, and you say you're just 80% on board, then where would fans that are 80% on board, which I think is a pretty good number, actually. I think most are about in there. Where are you if you lose in the first round, Caleb?
I'm still as on board as I was before because I think they're
losing. Not you, but the fan base.
I think fan base. I think now because I think the grumblings were there before the tournament started. I think they're still on board largely because again, I think there's a lot of memories over the struggles of Tennessee basketball throughout the years. And honestly, since firing Don, I don't know if they fired since Don DeVoe left in 19 whatever that was. They have desperately struggled to find some consistency. They've had no stability in head coaching whatsoever. Bruce Pearl Rick Barnes has already lasted longer than any coach since Don DeVoe at Tennessee.
Caleb, let me do this. Okay, I can define really easily, and tell me on the message board if you disagree. I can define sustained success in football really easily. Okay. You should win an SEC title. And, well, I was saying this I'm going to change it actually. You should win with the 12-team playoff. You should win the SEC title, and you should be in the college football playoff 3 out of 5 years. That's a 5-year window.
You should win the SEC title all 3 years.
No. Once in the 5-year span,
Okay,
and then make the college football playoff 3 out of 5 years. I think that's fair. With
you're
the
talking
12
about top
team,
10 program of all time. Yeah, totally agree.
I mean, I got no, and if you can't live up to that, then it's time to head on out of Rocky Top. And I think Josh Heupel will be able to do that easily. John says, I'm starting to get tired of Barnes. I'm tired of taking Tums at 52. I would like to see us get further without being so frustrated during the season. Bruce Pearl got us to an Elite Eight. So with what you hear from the fan base and the feedback, please define, because I don't know. Because I was raised during the Doug Dickey era when basketball, was kind of like the, I don't know, it was kind of like the skee ball table at a Dave and Buster's. Everything else was really nice, but the skee ball table was just over there churning some revenue, and who cares? But Tennessee basketball doesn't have to be the skee ball anymore. They could invest money and go out and get a great coach. They've got the facilities. So define a 5-year run? What is fair, and is Rick Barnes living up to that?
Okay, so for me personally, I think a 5-year run is 4 trips to the NCAA tournament. I think it's good. I think it's fine if you miss once every 5 years just because of the nature of college basketball. You could have a rebuilding year, whatever. So 4 trips to the NCAA tournament, 3 top 25 finishes, should we say, win an SEC regular season title once in those 5 years.
I think you're being really nice to put the rankings on it, but the simple fact is it's a tournament sport.
Exactly. Yeah. And so in the NCAA tournament, I think you should be going to the second weekend once every 5 years. That's where I'm at with it. I don't really.
Wow.
I know I got low standards. I got a question just real quick before we go further.
Can I just tell you mine real quick?
Yeah, sure.
It's make the tournament 4 out of 5. It's make the Final Four 1 out of 5.
Once every 5 years for a program that's never made the Final Four in history?
I think the money's there. I think before Gonzaga got serious and invested money in it and realized they could do this, that they had the set of standards you have. I think Tennessee could do the same thing easier. They've got more money than Gonzaga. I think they could do this even if it requires hiring an up-and-coming coach and maybe having to replace him with another up-and coach. I think the standard should be Final Four every 5 years, make the tournament 4 out of 5.
I mean, we're talking like even at places like North Carolina and Duke, sometimes they go 5 years without making the Final Four. So I'm like,
and then they usually replace their coach.
Yes, but Tennessee's not on the North Carolina Duke standard. I'll just give you an example because we brought up Gary Williams earlier. Gary Williams is a Hall of Fame head coach. Won a national championship, was at Maryland for 20 years. He made 2 Final Fours. So that was once every 10 years. And so I'm just thinking like, look, I think Final Four I would give you, make the second weekend once every 5 and make a Final Four once every 8 or something like that. But a Final Four every 5 years,
you either have to go one of 2 routes to guarantee that would happen. You find the John Calipari, who has incredible ties to the AAU circuit and can get you the one-and-done players, or you have somebody that's an X's and O's savant that's ahead of the game, like I believe Bruce Pearl was at his time at Tennessee. Yes. You do those 2 things, then I'm not saying you fire a guy if he makes 5 straight Elite Eights. Don't get me wrong. But if you're ending it with, after this 5-year run, made the tournament 4 times, got bounced out once, made the Sweet 16 twice, and then got bounced out in the second round. No. Then you should be worried about your job at the end of 5 years.
Man, Dave got those standards.
There's too much money, Caleb.
You were definitely the dad. You were definitely the parent that was like, my kid needs to bring home no more than 2 B's and no C's allowed on the report card.
Yes, I was that.
I knew it. Dave is like, expectations are really high, and this is what I expect. And
you've got all this money, and you've got NIL money. I mean,
okay, so here's a question I have for you, because you covered a lot of coaching hires in the past, and I think Bruce Pearl and definitely Josh Heupel kind of just Lane Kiffin more than Bruce Pearl, but really just like, kind of lit this idea on fire. But how often does Tennessee hire or stick with coaches because they're such a good fit in the community and they get along with the boosters? Because Rick Barnes is this type of coach. He is a Western North Carolina Appalachian guy. He fits in this community. Does that help? Was that a reason for history purposes? Was that a reason they hired Buzz Peterson? Because he was so connected to the area.
Yes, and they weren't connected at the time to basketball circles. So that was kind of the best they could do. They're like, oh, he was in Michael Jordan's wedding. That works for us. That's pretty much what they did. It is. And Michael Jordan didn't show up to Thompson Bowling Arena one time. Think of how much he could have helped Tennessee recruit had he showed up.
Have you guys seen Michael Jordan, the NBA executive? He would be the worst recruiter ever because his talent evaluation is pathetic.
All he has to do is show up. And then Buzz says, this is the guy we really want. And Michael says, I'm the man. Well, today's tough question a step further. In 5 years, is Tennessee better off if Rick Barnes coaches until he's 73 or they go get a young up-and-comer? Are they going deeper into the tournament year in and year out?
Okay, look, I will say this, but I'm taking a huge gamble, but I don't know if I'm right. I will say they're better off with the young up-and-comer. But again, I say that because Danny White is athletic director. If Dave Hart is athletic director, I'm not saying that at all.
Well, and you could hire a Donnie Tyndall that embarrasses your program. So, I mean, that is very possible. But
by the way, Dave Hart, Mike Hamilton, they all should have hired Rick Byrd. That was the greatest failure in Tennessee basketball.
Rick Byrd would have had the same career that Rick Barnes has had at Tennessee. If they'd have hired him at the same time, there's no question. And I'll say this. If you go out and you hire an up-and-coming coach and he doesn't pan out for whatever reason, as long as he doesn't get you in serious NCAA issues, what are you going to do? You're going to go hire another one. And that's what Tennessee did with Bruce Pearl. They caught him on the way up, partially because of all that happened with Illinois and him trying to turn another team in and secretly record people. So they were able to get a really great deal on a really great coach, because a lot of other programs didn't want to hire him because he had a tarnished reputation. But the simple fact is, Tennessee, there's 10 other coaches that are considered up-and-coming coaches right now that they could go hire if Rick Barnes retired after this NCAA tournament, and they could get the exact same result. And if that's what you're good with, again, stick with that dude for 10 or 15 years. But I think at that point, because Rick Barnes is such a saint, you would say to the new guy, unless he follows in line with that, you would say, maybe it's time for another new guy.
Yeah.
I think Tennessee could do that. I think they could get out of contracts. I know they're joked about as buyout university, but if it takes something to, let's face it, I mean, Tennessee's still looking for the next Bruce Pearl. Bruce Pearl loved Tennessee. He was never going to leave. He was never going to take another job. Rick Barnes flirted with UCLA openly. I don't understand. What's that?
Because he wanted a pay raise. Yeah.
Right. I don't understand just the blind loyalty of this is just as absolutely good as it can get. And this is where Tennessee is, and just accept it. Had Gonzaga accepted that, they wouldn't be any better. So had Had Kentucky football accepted that, they would still be a 3-18.
But Kentucky, that's a good example, though. Okay, I'm not saying Tennessee basketball is Kentucky football. I think Tennessee basketball ceiling is higher than Kentucky football. But Kentucky football has accepted that this is the best they can do with Mark Stoops. I still say Mark Stoops has done a better job than any coach in college football the last 10 years. To do what he's done at Kentucky, the hardest program to be successful at, and Kentucky's football program, their administration knows that about them.
But Caleb, if you want to hold on, if you want to make that comparison, then you've got to factor in that Mark Stoops and Kentucky, they do have a glass ceiling because of the lack of in-state recruiting talent. The fact that if you go north, Ohio and the Big Ten teams are going to dominate. If you go south, Tennessee is going to dominate. You really are stuck in a recruiting sort of strange position where you can only get so much better. That's not the case with Tennessee basketball. If they go out and pick up, some superstar, Bronny James or whoever it might be, then you can change the trajectory of the program. It doesn't take 12 guys. It takes one or two.
That's true. The question becomes, what is the style of play? And this may be a different question, a different day. What's the style of play in basketball that's like Josh Heupel style in football that nobody's tapped into yet? We should start scouting some coaches, Dave, and see what's the style in basketball that hasn't been tapped into yet.
I tell you, it's been tapped into and it worked, and I would go back and do it again. Amoeba defense. UNLV, somebody mentioned them earlier, and it got me thinking that may be a little bit before your time. So are you aware of what the Amoeba defense is?
I know the UNLV run, but I don't know what the Amoeba defense was. No.
Okay, the Amoeba defense was you had such 5 special athletes that you basically played 4-on-5, and then the 5th guy, which was usually Stacey Augmon, would play the ball. Wherever the ball went, he went and covered the ball. And you didn't allow easy scores from the post. Would it work nowadays with the 3-point shot? I don't know, but it was very.
That would be so exhausting, though. It would wreck your ability on offense because you'd be using so much energy on defense.
You get so many easy buckets, which is what they did.
And that reminds me somewhat of like a half-court version of 40 Minutes of Hell.
Yeah, very, very similar. Yeah. So. Anyway, there's stuff out there you could do that's different than, hey, let's go shoot the mid-range jumper and defend the post. It's hard to watch. That's the one response I get with Tennessee basketball. That's the one response I get is, man, Dave, gosh, I hope they do good in the tournament, but they're really hard to watch. Really, really hard to watch.
Very, very, very true. I think part of success is just finding a style that maybe not even is up and coming style. It's so different than what everybody has to face on a week in and week out basis that you have to change up everything you do when you face this team.
Yes. I'll tell you what Tennessee basketball is right now. It's a Lenny Kravitz album. Every year is a Lenny Kravitz album. There's one good song on there that gets you really excited, and then the other 12, 13, 14 songs are just total clunkers.
I would have said
it's the Joshua Tree of college basketball. The first 3 songs are great by U2, and then after that, you're like, what the hell is this all about?
It's funny you say that. I've always thought of Joshua Tree as a legendary album, and then I'm thinking, no, it's really the first 3 songs.
It's the first 3 songs, and you're in, and then you get like 6 or 7 deep, and you're like in February waiting for the tournament, and you're like, this isn't very good.
No, you're right. That's actually a really good point. Some make such a good impression. They're like, it'll be like the first 7. Get Rich or Die Trying, 50's first album, first 7 songs, all like historic bangers.
Go buy a Lenny Kravitz album. Pick any one you want.
I bought one time, and you have a great point.
One good song, right?
Yes.
And the other 11, you're like, were they even trying?
He did that was what so many artists used to do. They're like, all right, let me get this one single, and I'll sell the albums, and then I'll sleepwalk my way through the rest of it. And then they complain about streaming singles and no longer doing albums. I'm like, well, that's because you're responsible for that.